Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. We're going to give you a minute to trickle in. If you've joined us before, welcome back. And if this is your first session, we're especially glad that you're here today. This is a webinar focused on at-home writing strategies for early childhood. That's our toddlers all the way up to age five-ish. But certainly all of these strategies can be used for children of any age. Closed captioning will be available. We encourage you to use the chat box. If you want to put questions, use the Q&A box. We'll have time to get to those at the end. And so today we're focusing on writing. This is our family-facing webinar, so welcome families. If you are an educator who is joining us to get some tips to share with the families in your school community, you're welcome as well. We hope that everyone learns a lot from us today. Just a little bit about who we are. I'm Dr. Erin Bailey. I'm the Vice President of Literacy Programs and Research at Reading is Fundamental, and we are the nation's largest children's literacy nonprofit. Our mission is simple: to inspire the joy of reading and ensure that every child has access to opportunities and resources to become a lifelong reader and a lifelong learner. These webinars are part of our ongoing commitment to every educator, every family member who wants to support literacy and bring those strategies to life. And I am thrilled to have Dr. Crystal Luce from West Chester University in Pennsylvania join us this evening. Crystal has over 17 years as a teacher, reading specialist, instructional coach, administrator before she went into being a professor. Her research focuses on early learning environments, teacher preparation, and professional learning. And she also is the founder of the nonprofit Plant the Seed of Learning. And she also has a podcast around this topic as well. So she works directly with families and young children to support early learning through something I'm very passionate about: play-based learning experiences. And she shares all that wealth of knowledge through her podcast as well. So we're excited to have you here. Welcome, Dr. Luce.
Thank you so much, Erin. I'm very excited to be here tonight to discuss all things writing. So let's get started. And thank you for the lovely introduction. That was very nice. Welcome to Goals for Early Writing at Home. We'll talk about several things today, but especially why writing is crucial for toddlers and preschoolers. And then we'll discuss a little bit about what the research says about this topic, how this can be accomplished at home in fun and entertaining ways, and early writing strategies. So let's begin with one of the foundational elements of writing, oral language development. This is the beginning blocks of expression, especially necessary when you're beginning to develop those writing skills. Oral language precedes literacy, and then it parallels it as children progress in the literacy spectrum. Oral and written language are developmental processes that are mutually supportive of one another, and parents are essential in building oral language. The quality of the language that parents use at home, the books that are read aloud to children, they all are the building blocks of the oral language development, so essential for literacy and early writing. Let's move on a little bit and dig into this. When you're thinking about oral language development, we think about it as foundational for writing development early on. It is strongly predictive of later reading and writing abilities. That's why it's so important that parents begin talking with their children right from birth. This builds the oral language vocabulary, so important and crucial later. In preschool, receptive language generally develops before expressive language. So I thought it would be essential that we talk a little bit about what these words mean. Receptive language and expressive language. Receptive language is how we understand the language around us and the ability to hear and comprehend language. It's needed for learning, play, communication with others, understanding directions, safety, and participation in everyday activities. So if you look at the chart, receptive language could be following directions, such as when a parent says, get your shoes on. This takes a lot of skill, but this is actually the beginning of oral language development. So if they're not listening to you, they might be still developing that skill. They're beginning to understand questions and the knowledge to answer questions because there's a difference between statements such as get your shoes on and questioning that parents do. They begin to identify objects such as colors, so find the blue block, and then they're starting to grasp higher level concepts. Expressive language is when we're communicating with others. So, expressive language is really expressed through speech, sign language, written words, which is what we're talking about today, pictures, which we'll talk about as well, symbols and gestures, and even body language. When babies are first born, they're looking at a caregiver's face. And this is crucial in the development of understanding body language, which comes later through expressive language. So, the way babies stare at you initially is so, so crucial for the development of expressive language to be used later. Expressive language is when you're using words or sentences to communicate. When we're talking about our smallest children, it's when we're using smiles, babbles, and then as we progress into toddlerhood, phrases, and then preschoolers start to use sentences. The second area essential for writing development is vocabulary development. So let's talk a little bit about those building blocks for writing development, reading books. And this is actually at a session that I taught in Pennsylvania with families. And you can see here, we get down on the floor, and after I do the session, we actually apply what was talked about. And so this is a mother and her daughter, and they're actually reading the book together. The second step of this is examining pictures. This is huge for vocabulary development, especially when you're pointing to the pictures in the book and telling them what the picture is, and then having them find the picture later. This is great for developing vocabulary. And the third area crucial for vocabulary development is singing songs. Singing songs are a great way for children to understand the language structure. And eventually they begin singing the songs themselves, and it's just a great way to develop vocabulary. All of this is essential and leads to writing because as writers, you're using your oral language skills to put writing on paper. You're using your vocabulary development to think about what you want to say through writing. And then you're using your fine motor skills. This is the third area essential for development of writing. Fine motor skills are so important. You can see this is at another session that I've taught children very young, beginning to write using special crayons. This is all the beginning phases of fine motor development. So, fine motor development really begins when babies and toddlers start to play. So it doesn't mean you need a writing instrument. It means you're strengthening those small hand and finger muscles, leading to drawing. So I like to give some milestones between 12 to 18 months. You'll see babies building with blocks, maybe scribbling, waving bye-bye, and using a spoon. Those are essential milestones in fine motor development. 18 to 24 months of age increases with the block building. You start to see some towers. You might see some rings being put on stackers. You might see the pincher grips starting to happen. At 2 to 3 years of age, you'll see some large towers happening. You might be able to see them unscrew a lid on a toy jar, copying a circle, being able to zipper things, but by kindergarten, most students should be able to use the tripod pencil grip with a pencil. They should be able to use scissors to cut lines and have mostly something that looks like a letter when they're writing or a shape. So, a couple of things that I like to show parents pertaining to this early development. When I talk about some of those toys, these are great for fine motor development. The simply stringing those beads like this, and then forming the little bracelets. For babies, you might see little objects or puzzles like this with that pull apart or come apart easily, and then you put them back together. That they're all essential for fine motor development. Something else that I like are these crayons that are in the shape of triangles because it naturally helps them grip the crayon in the way that we want them to eventually grip, and that's with that tripod grip. So, what about the preschool age students? They too are starting to develop fine motor skills essential for writing. You might see them being able to play with Play-Doh and actually start to make shapes. Screwing nuts and bolts, also essential. Squeezing a tennis ball. Some arts and craft activities that I like for preschoolers involves a golf tee, and they use it to poke holes in a paper to make a drawing. That really helps with the grip. Simple activities at home include peeling fruit. So peeling an orange is actually progressing in fine motor development. Squeezing anything, sponges, or I like these squeezy bottles like this. I fill them up and I give children a bin and they squeeze these, and that's actually helping with their grip. A great way to encourage fine motor development. Um, the fuzzy pipe cleaners also excellent for preschoolers, helps with fine motor development. Also great to talk about shapes, which actually helps with writing when they're doing their pictures. So the more hands-on materials and tools you use, the more beneficial it is for our youngest learners because it keeps them engaged. You're developing those fine motor skills while you're playing, and they don't even realize it. Whoops, I think I went a little too far there. So let's talk a little bit about the research. So now we talked about three crucial areas for writing development. We've talked about oral language, we've talked about vocabulary, and fine motor skills. So those are the three building blocks that lead to fine motor development and writing skills. Let's start with handwriting. Handwriting, I say, is tattoo worthy. So, a lot of people put tattoos on their bodies because they feel this is something really important. I say handwriting is just as important as any tattoo. It's tattoo worthy. There's a lot of research out right now regarding handwriting. For a little while, it went by the wayside because we were so involved in technology. Handwriting difficulties, they've discovered, can affect children's attitude and motivation at school. And sometimes they begin because children come to school lacking the fine motor development necessary for writing, so they get a little bit discouraged. During the preschool years, it's really important to develop handwriting. It helps with literacy skills and children's overall development. It leads from the progression from scribbling to the actual written language. Handwriting is a critical indicator of students' academic success in kindergarten. So that's too why you want to practice writing at home, even if it's with these chunky crayons. So important. Strong fine motor skills in kindergarten are predictive of reading achievement. Children who develop better fine motor skills showed improvement not only in literacy, but in mathematical performance. So very important. So I often get asked at sessions, okay, well, what's the difference if my child does poking at the keyboard? Isn't that developing the fine motor skills necessary? And I say, no, not really. It's not the same. And here's why. Although using your fingers is really great and it does do something for fine motor, handwriting practice has been identified as a key exercise supporting the acquisition of alphabetic knowledge. And this supports the pre-reading stage. So knowing letters and practicing the formation of letters does something for the brain. And what is especially important is not only knowing the letters, but practicing them through writing, that really, really helps and plays a critical role in embedding the alphabetic knowledge within the brain's learning center. So that's why it's important that children are practicing writing at home. The shift from handwriting to typing may actually negatively affect the literacy learning. So when you have your youngest learners, don't stress about the writing of the letters. Remember, you're developing the fine motor skills, but maybe the year before kindergarten, when they're really starting to get interested in writing their names, that's when it's really important to practice those handwriting skills. So there is a progression of writing. After you've developed all these background skills, writing goes through a simple progression. And sometimes parents don't think children are writing, but they're really writing. So we begin with emergent writing. Emergent writing is a child's first attempt at writing. It begins as young as 2, and they simply start to imitate the print around them. And so they'll scribble. And this is actually my daughter's writing. I took a picture of it. So I always love to look at these things. It brings back great memories. But really, this is marks to represent their thinking. She was actually doing a picture there. So this is emerging very early. That's why it's called emergent. Stage 1 is the first stage of writing, and this is the random scribbling stage between 15 and 2.5 years, 15 months and 2.5 years. At this stage, many children love the sensory feedback that art activities provide. So it might be the smell of paint, the way the crayon feels in their hand, the squishiness of Play-Doh. Oh, I thought I was going to sneeze. Ah, okay. Some children do not enjoy some of this sensory activity, play, and that's okay. Sometimes they hate fingerprint painting. They don't like to get their fingers dirty. As they grow and begin to tolerate more types of sensory input, gradually reintroduce sensory art at later stages. This offers great opportunity for scribbling, and it's important that you offer a wide variety of art materials. So yogurt or applesauce can serve as finger paint. You don't have to go out and buy finger paint. The chunky crayons that I showed earlier, sidewalk chalk, large paintbrushes are great, especially for outside play. I love when children paint the walk with paintbrushes, and essentially they're trying to write. So it's a great method for scribbling. Stage 2 is when you see controlled scribbling, and this happens between 2 and 3 years. Over time, children make the transition to holding the crayon between their thumb and pointer finger, and you might see marks that are more controlled, like this. So before it was a giant scribble, but now they're actually more controlled. And you might see diagonal, as you see here, or vertical or horizontal lines. As children progress, you'll see lines and patterns. So I love this chart on the left. It talks about all the pre-writing line developments for kids. So you can see the vertical line happens early, then the horizontal line, and then progressing to the circle. This is actually harder for children to do. The crossing of the vertical line actually happens much later because it is very hard to make that shape. Progressing to square, to diagonals, the X around age 5, and the triangle shape around age 5. And then you'll see at this stage, children begin to understand that print is made up of curved, straight, and diagonal lines. They may not yet be able to make letters correctly, but they begin to make marks resembling common letters, sometimes using dots, curves, and lines. So your toddler is beginning to realize that print conveys meaning and may read to you what they have written on a page. By age 5, most children have developed the ability to make all lines necessary for letter formation, as you see here. And as you see on this page, the writing starts to go from left to right. That's a really exciting development. And we talked earlier about the importance of reading a book. Children are reading and you're pointing, and if you're showing them left to right, this is how they begin to develop the understanding that print goes from left to right. So it begins by all those things you've done previously. Stage 4 includes pictures of objects and people. It's between 3 to 5 years of age. Young children will often create a picture first and then label their masterpiece afterwards. During this stage, you'll see your child more clearly planning a picture and then adding more details to the picture using more controlled movements of pencils or crayons. You might see more colors. Children's pictures are often built from circles. So you can see this is very typical of stage 4. You'll see a circle for the person's head, and then you'll see arms and legs just randomly sticking out. This is an exciting phase. You can see now that children understand that a drawing on a page represents something to them. It could be a dog, it could be a cat, it could be the sun, but it is symbolizing a real object. At stage 5, you'll see letter and word practice, and this is between 3 and 5 years of age. Children usually begin making pretend letters. You can see lots of amazing letters on this paper, and then using all the strokes they have mastered. So you can see a lot going on here. They'll assume that they've created letters that are real because they resemble letters that they've seen. So all the amazing reading that you've been doing will pay off and they'll start to mimic that. Their word scribbles will begin to change from one long string of letters to actual shapes grouped together, and they start to form something that looks like words. And this is a true milestone when you see this happening. Something else to think about is art. Art and writing are one and the same for young children. You'll see them doing a lot of art early on, and this is really important because they're discovering that their mark on the page was directly caused by their hand movements. This starts early and is powerful because they're starting to learn about cause and effect. This development in their thinking skills is further fueled by increased muscle control in their hands and fingers. So all that work you did on fine motor development begins with art and then leads to the writing, and you'll see the progression that we discussed on the previous slides start to happen. At this stage, many children love the sensory activities, and that's important that they understand that art is necessary, that it's part of writing and creating masterpieces. So some progressions that you'll see as far as fine motor development, and occupational therapists love to talk about these skill sets because the development of the muscles is so crucial for writing. It begins with your hand and finger strengths. You'll see that early on, even with babies, when they're learning to hold things in their hands. Crossing the midline, so important. Your body is the mid, and so being able to cross over the hand-eye coordination, being able to grasp, is really developing some fine motor strengths. The pencil grasp happens. Hand-eye coordination is really essential. So all the playing with toys actually leads to better hand-eye coordination. Tummy time with babies, so important for hand-eye coordination and developing the core strength necessary, which is essential for writing. Bilateral integration involves the upper body strength. The upper body strength also so crucial. When you think about a child when they're just starting to sit and write and scribble, they really need that upper body strength. Object manipulation begins to happen. You see that through Play-Doh activity, and when they're manipulating that Play-Doh, you know that they're strengthening their fine motor skills. Visual perception, so important to enable them to write, print alphabetically. You'll begin to see the development of hand dominance. So they'll start to favor one hand or the other, and that is all important. Something I also like to tell parents, pictures are wonderful ways to give children ideas for writing. It helps to develop imagination. It helps with their storytelling ability. I'm a previous kindergarten teacher, and one thing that started to happen with my kindergarten students is they were running out of ideas to write. I couldn't believe it. So I used to give them folders filled with pictures, And every day they would come in and they would pull out a beautiful picture and it would get them started with a story. And then they would always add their own additional writing to it. So when you're at home, you can practice this skill set just with a picture. You can pull out family photos and have them start to talk about what the picture means, what happened first, what happened next, and what happened last. And that really helps build vocabulary and also the understanding of writing is telling a story. And it helps them understand progression from beginning to end. Because when you're writing a story, typically you want a beginning and end. And that happens much later when they're entering formal schooling, but you need to develop that when they're young through pictures. The pictures on the right here can be found on the RIF website. This is a great set of cards to help build that vocabulary, so essential that we talked about earlier. Literacy-rich environments of any kind are really important. I love to tell parents at my sessions to have some type of bag that they travel with when they're out and about, because it's a great way to avoid tantrums when you can pull out your goodie bag and you have a lot of toys for fine motor skill development. You have a notebook, you have papers, you have markers, you have stickers, you have robots, whatever they're into. This is an example of my daughter's little writing book. So this came with us everywhere. And inside it, she would draw all kinds of fun pictures. She would take notes when we were out and about. So I love to suggest that to parents. So, just a final note about reading and writing and how interdependent they are. They're essential to each other and mutually beneficial. Beginning readers and writers need to learn to use many sources of information, including memory, experience, pictures, and their knowledge of language, the sound symbol connections, and phonics. So important and crucial for later writing skill development. So, all of the wonderful reading that you're doing, all the scribbling that you're starting out with, all lead to wonderful masterpieces. So I hope this was helpful. Here's a little information about the Early Childhood Education Center. I don't know if you want to elaborate at all on that, Erin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Luce.
Yeah.
That was just lovely. I love all the practical tips for the families too. And I really appreciate the way you walked us through how writing actually begins with expressive and listening and speaking, basically expressive and receptive language. I have a 1-year-old and he's just starting to, if I say, go get your shoes, go and get your shoes, who would have known that that is actually skills
Mhm.
for helping build his writing journey for him?
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I did drop a few things in the chat for everyone. All of these resources can be found on Reading is Fundamentals Early Childhood Education Digital Hub, Digital Center, which is here. And yeah, we'll leave some time for Q&A if anyone has any
Yeah.
questions. I
And
did
I'll
have
throw this up
one
here.
if anyone wants to put them in the chat or in the Q&A box, go ahead. I appreciate what you said about how handwriting is so important, and we kind of went into typing for a while.
We did.
Um, I was wondering, because I've seen this come up a lot now, if you have any thoughts on
Mhm.
cursive writing. I know that's for older children usually, but it seems like when Common Core kind of took over around 2013, that phased out cursive and almost replaced it with typing a little bit. So just curious if you have any thoughts there.
I am 100% for cursive, and the same research goes direct. It really explains cursive writing as well. So, what the research is showing is when children are note taking, so they can print, but writing out the notes is so much better for memory retention. So, what's happening, at least in Pennsylvania, a lot of schools are required to teach cursive again, which I'm so thankful for. But when you think about note-taking skills, cursive is faster.
Hmm.
And so that's why they're bringing it back for those reasons. It's better for brain development, brain retention. Um, so yeah, I am 100% for cursive.
It makes a lot of sense, especially if you think about phonics development too. A lot of the training that I've had is all about multisensory learning. So, for
Mhm.
example, air writing. You're not just seeing the letter and saying the sound, but you're actually I'm drawing an A right now, and I'm saying ah as I'm drawing it. And as you
Mhm.
mentioned, you can do this also with Play-Doh. Gooey stuff, just things depending on where you are with your sensory, your
Yeah.
approach to sensory. But I think it makes sense because you're making that connection between the shape and the sound while you're doing it versus just touching it on a keyboard. It doesn't seem like it's going to make that concrete connection there.
Hmm. So true. And it follows children all the way up through high school into college. The research is really amazing about the importance of writing the notes and the cursive. So yeah.
Yeah. Many
Yeah,
people,
makes
if
sense.
you want to remember something, write it down.
Exactly. That's why we have thousands of sticky notes everywhere. Like, don't forget to do this. Yeah.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much again. If you are
Oh,
interested in catching more of our webinars, we have one coming up this Friday, 12 o'clock Eastern time, and that is Every Book is a Mental Health Book. We'll have our wonderful facilitator, Jessica Jones, will walk you through how to use children's literature to promote mental health for young children. And then on May 12th, we will kick off summer with Finding Joy in Summer Reading, brought to you by Katie Potter from Lee and Low Publishing and our very own Carly O'Brien from Reading is Fundamental. And don't forget to check out our podcast, Reading Inspires, hosted by myself, Dr. Erin Bailey, and I will be having Crystal on the show in the coming months. So please be sure to tune in for that. And thank you for coming. We hope you have a wonderful evening.
thank you. And I'm looking forward to the podcast. Thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.